Every so often here on Weather World, we like to check in with a Pennsylvania State climatologist. We are pleased to have the Pennsylvania State Climate Office here within the Penn State Department of Meteorology and Atmospheric Science. For that, we turn to the climatologist himself, Kyle Imhoff. Thanks so much for joining us on Weather World today, Kyle.
Well, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So in the past, we've talked a lot about the Keystone Mesonet. Any updates on that Mesonet project? Any new sites installed over the course of the summer?
Yeah, so the last time we spoke, we were talking about the alerting system, and now we've added some new sites to our Pennsylvania Environmental Monitoring Network. So we actually installed 4 sites this summer. We have a site at Cherry Springs State Park, which is in Potter County. We have a site at Kinzua Bridge State Park, which is in McKean County, Bald Eagle State Park in Center County, and then Mount Davis in Somerset County.
So really trying to fill in some of those gaps across Pennsylvania, giving us more data.
Exactly.
How are some of these sites maintained? You know, you're talking, some of them are pretty remote up by the Kinzua Bridge and everything.
Yeah, so ideally you want these sites to be visited at least 2 to 4 times a year, so quarterly if you can. Like you said, these sites are remote, so there can be some maintenance issues. You want to make sure the grass is mowed and everything's maintained around the site. You get critters that like to crawl into the rain gauge, and all these sensors, the cables can get cut by groundhogs and things like that. So you want to try to visit these sites regularly.
Yeah, it really is an impressive network, and it's something that really hasn't been measuring a whole bunch of precipitation as we went through the summer. I wanted to talk with you about the process of drought declarations and how that's done.
Yeah, so the drought declaration is done by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. So they actually have a task force that looks at precipitation data. Usually they look at 60 to 90-day precipitation departures, and they determine whether they need to issue drought watches or warnings or emergencies, and that can impact things like water use restrictions, agriculture restrictions to using water for their applications. So that's done by the Department of Environmental Protection.
So let's talk a little bit more about this summer, and I guess for perspective, you know, how did this summer's dryness compare to a typical summer?
Yeah, so this summer we've actually received about half to 3/4 of our typical precipitation across the state. Particularly central and eastern Pennsylvania have been our driest spots, so that's where we've averaged about half to 3/4 of our typical summer rainfall.
And you're looking at data that goes back, you know, over 100 years as far as the Climate Office is concerned.
Yep.
What was the driest summer on record in PA? Do you happen to know that off the top of your head?
Yeah, so if you look at the meteorological summer season, which is June 1st through August 31st, the driest summer was actually 1966. That actually capped off, there was several summers in a row from the early 1960s through the mid-1960s that we were actually relatively dry during the summer months.
So it's been dry, but nothing record-breaking by any means here in Pennsylvania this summer.
Nope.
One of the great things is that the Climate Office has a report that you issue every month, and I thought it was really cool to read about how a dry summer can portend to some interesting things about autumn in Pennsylvania.
That's right, yep. So like you said, I just wrote an article last month that highlighted, if you look at past summer seasons when we've been dry in Pennsylvania, the following fall tends to be actually relatively mild and wet, strangely enough, in central and eastern Pennsylvania during September, October, November time period. So that would be welcome rainfall for those areas that were dry these past several months.
For sure. Shifting gears, Kyle, you also teach here within the department. This particular semester, you're teaching Meteorology 415, which is an introduction to forecasting.
Yes.
What are some of the topics that you've covered so far this semester?
Yeah, so that's an interesting class. So we focus on a lot of the basic meteorology, the fundamentals, the things that the students learn in some of their other core class, where the physics and the math, and then we're applying a lot of that theory to the real world, the real atmosphere. So we focus on a lot of things like, how do you apply all those equations to trying to make a forecast? How does that go into the numerical weather prediction models we look at on a regular basis? All those models that we talk about on these weather forecast broadcasts. And so that's what we spend a lot of time doing initially, and then we start getting into the meat of the semester where they start to make the forecast themselves.
And the cool thing about that class is how it's structured when it comes to, you know, assessing their forecasting skill. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yep, so we do forecast contests. We do 3 during the semester. The percentage of their final grade increases with how they do in each contest. So those 3 contests span several weeks, with contest 3 being the longest, and it's probabilistic forecasting. So they're looking at the probabilities of certain things occurring for a given period of time. We usually focus on short range forecasting in 415. So we are looking at 12 to 36 hours out, generally speaking. So that's the setup for the contest. And then at the end of the contest, we see who won and how they did, and that affects their grade.
Maybe some prizes in addition to just a good grade.
That's right, yeah.
In addition to teaching Meteorology 415 and those forecasting basics, you're also doing work in the climate office with students. Any cool projects coming down the pipeline this fall?
That's right. So one of the classes I teach too is climate studies, and we do a lot of work with our students to get them involved in projects we work on a regular basis. So part of what we do is we have the students write articles for our monthly newsletter, so they will contribute to that, and we do several articles each month. We do a climate highlight that features interesting weather that occurred either in the state of Pennsylvania or in the region. We try to focus on the Northeast. We also have a long-range forecast where we predict the next 2 months out of weather and climate patterns based on what's happened in the past, and then we also have a weather summary that summarizes the major weather features that impacted Pennsylvania during the past month.
It's a really good report, especially for those involved in the agricultural community. Gives a lot of good information there and a nice recap, but also looking ahead with some of your forecasts too. Any exciting new projects on the horizon? I know the Climate Office is really big into partnerships with a bunch of different entities here in the Commonwealth. Anything new happening this fall?
Yeah, so we're going to continue to expand our mesonet operations, so working with our state agency partners for that. Another thing I'd like to do over the next 6 to 12 months is actually revamp our website presence. So I'd like to expand some of our data services and connect some of our mesonet work to our main Climate Office website. So that's a lot of work I'll be doing over the next year to try to expand those efforts.
That sounds great. Well, Kyle Imhoff, Pennsylvania State Climatologist, thanks as always for stopping by Weather World.
Absolutely.
And we'll be back in just a moment with more.